And welcome back to 101 East. We're discussing the Thai military government's relationship with the press and what that might say about the future of democracy in the country. In the studio, I have with me Professor Surachai Wangyao, who was appointed by the Thai military government to the Legislative Assembly. In Bangkok, Kraisek Chunhavan is a former senator, and also in Bangkok, Karuna Borkamsi, a Thai journalist. And Karuna, let me come to you. Describe to me the working conditions for a Thai journalist these days. Are you free to go where you will and report on what you like?
Anything about Thaksin, we can't talk about it. Like, it's very often that he's been interviewed by foreign press, and we're not allowed to say what he say, or any activities that he's doing abroad, we're not allowed to say. Even his lawyers say, you know, what he's doing, we're not allowed to say as well. So anything that related to Thaksin, and my station has policy that we're not allowed to say that because it's gonna create the divide in the country again. You know, as a media, we have the role to play to keep the national unity.
Kraisek Chunhavan, the situation that Karuna is describing there is specifically a political one. In a broader cultural context, do you think that the Thai situation now is a repressive one when it comes to freedom of speech?
Oh yes, it's always been like that, but it has changed drastically since in the 1990s. In fact, when we were having blossoming of democracy, there was fairly free and fair public broadcast press until Mr. Thaksin came in. Before that, there were debates, there were all sorts of programs which were extremely popular. Opposite views were being aired, broadcast on both on radio and on television. It was a very lively atmosphere, in fact, and the people were quite informed more and more on politics, on different issues. Even on community radios, which there are hundreds which are sprout out throughout the country, would be fairly free, and it was very useful for people to be educated and be informed about the economy, etc., and government's decision and how to tackle your community's problems. But when Thaksin came in, he destroyed all that. Even community radios were even outlawed. But the problem is that this present government has not improved the situation.
Well, you've heard what Senator Kraisek is saying there.
Yes.
I mean, do you agree that the situation has steadily deteriorated? And as a member of the current Legislative Assembly, what do you sense about the intent of the new government? Do you think that there is any proposal there, any idea there that perhaps they should try and reverse the kind of trend that the Senator is talking about?
I agreed with the assessment of the past with Senator Kraisek very much. But now talking about the present and the future trends, at the National Legislative Assembly, there are now some laws in relation to transforming the public media into a real public media. Mr. Thaksin did for Thailand very much in the sense that the public media under the government were made private and were in other way controlled by big capitals, and very much related to his cronies. So that was the story of the recent past. Now there are this how to guarantee the public ownership among the people, as well as how to make it serve the public interest. That is the issue of the new legislation.
Well, Karuna Borkamsi, let me come to you. ITV, the station for which you worked before, is now still under a great deal of debate. Its future is under debate, and there is talk that it might be made a public broadcaster with a public ownership. Would that possible scenario, does that seem likely scenario to you? And is it something that would be welcomed by the community there? Do you think there's a demand for that kind of public broadcaster?
Oh, definitely. We very much want to see the real independent television station again. And, you know, for ITV, I think the future must go that way. Because right now, I'm talking about like broadcasting media here is totally, you know, controlled. I mean, let me go back to the first question. I mean, I'm trying to explain that we are not in fear, but we just feel totally uncomfortable with the whole thing that's happening because of the politics is so uncertain. So we're not sure whether we should say something or shouldn't say something because of, you know, the army might not be very happy or the government might not be very happy. So totally having independent television or station would be a great help.
So Senator Kreisek, let me come to you and let's touch on this touchy subject of how the king is treated in Thailand. Now, his position as a cultural icon is not in question, but the question of how he should be spoken of is surely a part of this whole conversation. And the fact that the laws at the moment are being used to stifle any comment on him, irrespective of whether it's insulting or not, would seem to play into this conversation a little bit. Do you think that maybe a step forward would be to actually address that point as a lead for the broader questions?
Thailand is in a bind in a way. It wants to go forward, yet we have this anachronistic, you know, like a lèse majesté law, in which the king himself have declared over and over again that the king can do wrong if he's given wrong informations, and that he can be criticized. But you have this, on the other side, you have this extreme, what we call reactionary people who have time and time again used the king for their own political purposes, like suppression, for instance, that it happened in 1976. Now, it will continue to happen again. There are all sorts of cases. Mr. Thaksin, for instance, launched lèse majesté criminal cases against all his critics. Namely, many of the groups that were in the public protests against his regime. But when people launch, you know, a case against Thaksin's own supposedly lèse majesté statements, the Attorney General has decided that it was not. That cannot be persecuted. Okay. Mr. Thaksin cannot be persecuted. The decision was made yesterday. So we do have this in a way, a backward, you know, like law which exists, and it should be reformed.
Karuna Buangkamsi, let me put that to you. As a journalist, would a lead from the king, he's already given us this lead, do you think that some kind of movement on the way one can address the king, would that actually make your life a little bit easier? Would that make the journalistic community relax a little bit if they felt that the power structure was not going to criticize them for every wayward comment that they might accidentally make?
Well, it's still too early to say that, because our big problem that facing us right now is not actually not being able to touch upon royal family issue, but you know, we're more concerned and pretty much confront with, like, you know, state control and the army. So I actually can't really, you know, project or say anything right now whether it's gonna make our life more easier. But in principle, I mean, the more we open, the more we allow to touch upon and certain issues, that would be better.
Professor, let me just ask you, what role do you think the media can play in Thailand to help the development of this new democracy?
The media has been playing very, very important roles. And now I think even under Thaksin, we have had quite a good press, printed media, but otherwise very much under control. But now we still have quite free media, accept certain types of issues a little too sensitive, and that was mentioned earlier by the colleagues.
Senator Kreisek, you've spoken about how you think the press freedom and the freedom of speech situation in Thailand has deteriorated for a number of years now. Are you fearful that this is a trend? Do you have hope that this new government and this new constitutional consultative process that we are going through might actually help to turn that around?
I hope it will not become a trend because individual regime like Mr. Thaksin and now the junta established government has made decision to control the press. But they are drafting now a new constitution. Supposedly, I will return Thailand to democracy. Without press freedom, we have no democracy.
And that's all we have time for today. My thanks to guests Surachai Wangyao, Mr. Kreisek Chunhavan and Karuna Buakamsi. And from all of us here at 101 East, it's goodbye for now.